Maverick News presents The Rick Walker Show. Defrag your mind.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rick Walker. Welcome back to the Maverick News Channel. We have a lot to share with you tonight. A huge show. So much going on. Special report tonight, a special interview, a couple of special interviews coming up. One with a woman who's going to talk to us about vaccine injuries, her personal story, and her experience with Canada's vaccine injury compensation program. So we'll get into that, and it is a heart-wrenching story and an important story, a story that I think we will be hearing, or it's a story that I think will repeat itself in similar ways with many other people in the months and years ahead. And what she's going to share with us tonight will, I think, maybe help some people. And in turn, we might be able to help her. So we'll have her join us, and we also have a representative from Veterans for Freedom who will be joining us on the program briefly to tell us how they're involved and assisting as well. So we've got that, and then we have Alexi Navalny, Vladimir Putin's main political opponent, who was thrown in jail. Perspectives on this vary, but he's dead. And that should give us all pause. Time to reflect a little bit. We're getting very different stories from opposite sides, which is not surprising given the adversarial relationship throughout history that the United States, the West, NATO countries have had with Russia, and not surprising given that we are, for all intents and purposes, at war with Russia today. Overlaying on top of all of that is the upcoming U.S. presidential election, a court ruling today involving Donald Trump, people who are involved with the Trump administration talking about the Navalny case, and strangely, I find them defending Vladimir Putin, which also gives me pause. You can draw your own conclusions. We'll share some of the information with you here tonight as much as we can, and I encourage you all to dig into the story in a much deeper way, research it on all sides, and maybe you'll get a little bit closer to the truth, something that is in short supply these days. It is the Convoy, Freedom Convoy, anniversary weekend, and people from far and wide are on their way to Canada's capital, if they haven't already arrived in Ottawa. And we have a news conference coming up that we will share with you involving a couple of key convoy figures. And in addition to that, Joe Biden will not only offer comments on the Navalny death, he will also talk about, well, we're going to take you to East Palestine, Ohio, on the anniversary of that train derailment and fire that spewed toxic chemicals into the atmosphere and fallout all over the community there. And here we are, like a year later, Biden finally shows up. It was kind of a strange day. We'll show you the protest there that was waiting for him as he arrived for his photo op a year later. Stay with me. There's a lot to share with you tonight.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, so first up tonight, Alexi Navalny. He was Vladimir Putin's main political opponent. Reports are that there were attempts to poison him at least twice. Got very sick from it, almost died a couple of times, survived. And then he was arrested. This is just all from the top of my head. He was arrested, thrown in jail, disappeared for a while in jail, couldn't be accounted for, and then was recently surfaced in a far north Arctic prison. And tonight he's dead. He was in this Arctic Circle jail, and he's dead. He was arguably Vladimir Putin's most vocal and prominent critic. He was serving at least 19 years in prison on charges of extremism that were politically motivated. I'm not sure about the sentencing because there have been many reports with different numbers. I've seen that he may have been sentenced to as much as 30 years, but 19 at a minimum. So the prison service in Russia, from the district where he was being held, says that overnight he was feeling unwell and went for a walk, and then, for whatever reason, lost consciousness, according to the Russians, and an emergency medical team was called in. They say they tried to resuscitate him, had no success, and he died. They say they are working to determine the cause of death. Already we are seeing lineups of people in Moscow laying flowers at a monument to victims of political repression. Prosecutors are warning Russians not to join any mass protests in the streets, and have already effected some arrests as a result of Navalny's death. He was 47 years old, and it was only a day before his death, just yesterday, well, I guess about a day and a half ago now, that he was seen alive and well. He was making an appearance in court. And now he's dead. Of course, what we're seeing here in the West is finger-pointing accusations. That Vladimir Putin may have had something to do with Navalny's death. That accusations that he was maybe killed, murdered. Politics, as they say, is a blood sport. And we will be hearing more about that later tonight, because everything we are talking about tonight, I think, pretty much is steeped in politics. Here is Joe Biden addressing Navalny's death today. Here we go. Let's pick up Joe Biden at the White House.
In a moment, but I wanted to say a few things this morning about reported death of Alexi. Bravely stood up to the corruption, the violence, and all the bad things that the Putin government was doing. In response, Putin had him poisoned, he had him arrested, he had him prosecuted for fabricated crimes, he sentenced him to prison, he was held in isolation. Even all that didn't stop him from calling out Putin's lies. Even in prison, he was a powerful voice for the truth, which is kind of amazing when you think about it. And he could have lived safely in exile after the assassination attempt on him in 2020, which nearly killed him, I might add. But he was traveling the country at the time. Instead, he returned to Russia. Knowing he'd likely be imprisoned or even killed if he continued his work. But he did it anyway, because he believed so deeply in his country, in Russia. Reports of his death, if they're true, and I have no reason to believe they're not, Russian authorities are going to tell their own story. But make no mistake, Putin is responsible for Navalny's death. Putin is responsible. What has happened to Navalny is yet more proof of Putin's brutality. No one should be fooled, not in Russia, not at home, not anywhere in the world. Putin does not only target his citizens of other countries, as we've seen in what's going on in Ukraine right now, he also inflicts terrible crimes on his own people. And as people across Russia and around the world are mourning Navalny today, because he was so many things that Putin was not. He was brave, he was principled, he was dedicated to building a Russia where the rule of law existed and where it applied to everybody. Navalny believed in that Russia. He knew it was a cause worth fighting for, and obviously even dying for. This tragedy reminds us of the stakes of this moment. We have to provide the funding so Ukraine can keep defending itself against Putin's vicious onslaughts and war crimes. You know, there was a bipartisan Senate vote that passed overwhelmingly in the United States Senate to fund Ukraine. Now, as I've said before, and I mean this in a literal sense, history is watching. History is watching the House of Representatives. The failure to support Ukraine at this critical moment will never be forgotten. It's going to go down in the pages of history. It really is. It's consequential. And the clock is ticking. And this has to happen. We have to help now. You know, we have to realize what we're dealing with Putin. All of us should reject the dangerous statements made by the previous president that invited Russia to invade our NATO allies if they weren't paying up. He said if an ally did not pay their dues, he'd encourage Russia to, quote, do whatever the hell they want. I guess I should clear my mind here a little bit and not say what I'm really thinking, but let me be clear. This is an outrageous thing for a president to say. I can't fathom. From Truman on, they're rolling over in their graves hearing this. As long as I'm president, America stands by our sacred commitment to our NATO allies, as they have stood by their commitments to us repeatedly. Putin and the whole world should know, if any adversary were to attack us, our NATO allies would back us. And if Putin were to attack a NATO ally, the United States will defend every inch of NATO territory. Now's the time for even greater unity among our NATO allies, to stand up to the threat that Putin's Russia poses. You know, I send my deepest condolences to Alexi's staff and supporters. We're going to continue his work despite this loss, despite all of Putin's desperate attempts to stamp out the opposition, and most of all to his family, especially to his wife, his daughter, and his son, who've already sacrificed so much for their family and a shared dream for a better future for Russia. So I just want to say God bless Alexi Navalny. His courage will not be forgotten, and I'm sure it will not be the only courage we see coming out of Russia in the near term. Thank you. I'll be happy to take a couple questions.
Sir, first, was this an assassination?
The answer is we don't know exactly what happened, but there is no doubt that the death of Navalny was the consequence of something that Putin and his thugs did.
And to be clear, you warned Vladimir Putin when you were in Geneva of devastating consequences if Navalny died in Russian custody. What consequences should he and Russia face?
That was 3 years ago. In the meantime, they faced a hell of a lot of consequences. They've lost and or had wounded over 350,000 Russian soldiers. They've made them in a position where they've been subjected to great sanctions across the board, and we're contemplating what else could be done. But what we were talking about at the time, there were no actions being taken against Russia. And look, all that's transpired since then.
Whether you're looking at increasing sanctions on Russia right now?
We're looking at a whole number of options. That's all I'll say right now.
Is there anything you can do to get ammunition to the Ukrainians without a supplemental from Congress?
No, but it's about time they step up, don't you think? Instead of going on a 2-week vacation. 2 weeks! They're walking away. 2 weeks! What are they thinking? My God, this is bizarre. And it's just reinforcing all the concern and almost, I won't say panic, but real concern about the United States being a reliable ally. This is outrageous.
Are you more confident now that you'll get the Ukraine aid, given what's happened today?
Well, I hope to God it helps. But I mean, the idea we need anything more to get the Ukraine aid. I mean, this is in light of a former president's statement that saying Russia, if they haven't paid their dues to us, go get them. Come on, what are these guys doing? What are they doing?
Sir, how concerned are you about the anti-satellite capability that Russia is developing, and what is your administration planning to do in response?
First of all, there is no nuclear threat to the people of America or anywhere else in the world with what Russia is doing at the moment, number one. Number two, anything that they're doing or they will do relates to satellites in space and damaging those satellites potentially. Number three, there is no evidence that they have made a decision to go forward with doing anything in space either. So what we found out, there was a capacity to launch a system into space that could theoretically do something that was damaging. Hadn't happened yet, and my my hope is it will not.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I'll take one more.
Thank you, Mr. President. Switching gears for a moment, have the Israelis presented a credible evacuation plan for the nearly 1.5 million displaced Palestinians sheltering in Rafah? And what would the consequences be for Israel if they move ahead with a full-scale ground invasion without clear measures to protect civilians there?
Well, first of all, I've had extensive conversations with the Prime Minister of Israel over the last several days, almost an hour each. And I've made the case, and I feel very strongly about it, that there has to be a temporary ceasefire to get the prisoners out, to get the hostages out. And that is underway. I'm still hopeful that that can be done. And in the meantime, I don't anticipate, I'm hoping that the Israelis will not make any massive land invasion in the meantime. So it's my expectation that's not going to happen. There has to be a ceasefire temporarily to get those hostages. By the way, we're in a situation where there are American hostages. American citizens are being held hostage. It's not just Israelis, it's American hostages as well. And, my hope and expectation is that we'll get this hostage deal. We'll bring the Americans home, and the deal is being negotiated now, and we're going to see where it takes us.
An FBI informant at the center of the impeachment inquiry into you has been indicted for allegedly lying. Your reaction to that, and should the inquiry be dropped?
He is lying, and it should be dropped, and it's just been an outrageous effort from the beginning. We did. No, I'm serious. See you in Ohio.
All right. He said he had to clear his mind. His mind was already cleared. He clearly had lost his train of thought, and his mind was obviously empty at that moment. And then asked what he's going to do about this situation with Navalny. He won't do a thing. He'll do nothing. That was clear. Empty talk. Rhetoric. A threat made some time ago. Another line in the sand that may have been crossed, and if it was, Biden will do nothing. Idle threats. The situation with Navalny making international headlines. Your perspective on it would depend on your politics and who you choose to believe, I suppose. In Canada, the leader of the New Democratic Party, Jagmeet Singh, weighed in on this subject. Here's what he had to say today about the Navalny death.
Passing of Alexi Navalny. This is a reminder to us of who Putin is. The fact that Navalny, a pro-democracy advocate, an opposition leader, was poisoned and then imprisoned and now is dead, reminds us of how important it is for us to stand with the people of Ukraine, to support Ukraine against the illegal invasion and war brought on by Putin. And it reminds us that all politicians should stand united in this fight. I'll do that in French, and then I'll look forward to your questions.
Okay. So that was Jagmeet Singh on the Navalny death. Now, this was interesting. This video was posted by George Papadopoulos. Do you remember that name? This I thought was very interesting. George Papadopoulos on his X account, formerly known as Twitter, posts this And we have the video here. This is an undercover video that was shot of Navalny with the accusation that he was conversing with William Thomas Ford, trying to negotiate or beg for, I guess, $10 to $20 million a year to support his political opposition to Vladimir Putin. James William Thomas Ford is an MI6 officer. And there are other allegations that Navalny was also speaking with the CIA about organizing what you would call a color revolution, which is a government campaign to destabilize a country and overthrow a government, with mass demonstrations as the focal point for that in the streets. We have seen that kind of thing happen, and from the Russian perspective, that is what happened in Ukraine in 2014. At least that's the story we're told. Now here's this video, and for it to come out today, the reason would be to undermine sympathy for Navalny and prop up support, or try to generate public support for Putin and the Russian government. Here's the video, undercover. This is what led to Navalny's arrest, I believe, where he was charged essentially with treason and attempting to organize an overthrow of the Russian government. Here it is, with subtitles below.
We would expand our activities, of course, with a little money. If somebody would spend, I don't know, $10-20 million a year on supporting this, we would see quite different picture. And this is, not a big amount of money for people who have billions at stake in this game. So that's the message that I'm trying to project in my fundraising effort and talking to people in business communities. You need to play on different chessboards. Mass protests, civil initiatives, propaganda, establishing contacts with the elite and explaining to them that we are reasonable people and not we're not going to demolish everything and take away their assets, things like that. So we'll see what comes out of that. So this broadly describes what I do.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, not a small job.
We were talking about this on our program the other day and pointing out the fact that a crime is a crime if you are working or planning the overthrow of a government and you're not in charge. That could be viewed as treason. Keep that in mind moving forward, folks. If you have any ideas of anything, then it becomes a question, I think, for people of, well, is it justified? And some people would support mass protests against a given government, depending on the circumstances. Other people would be opposed to it. But if you're Vladimir Putin and somebody is planning mass demonstrations to destabilize and then ultimately evict you from power, well, then I guess you take steps to protect your government and protect yourself. Now, that being said, Navalny is a political opponent. What was he talking about there? Mass protests. Is protesting illegal? In Russia, it may be. I'm not an expert on Russian law. At what point do protests cross the line and become treasonous? And even if you are trying to disrupt and overthrow a government, should you be killed? You're a political opponent at that point. Again, it depends on your perspective, doesn't it? One man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. And in this case, Navalny fits into both categories depending on somebody's perspective. A hero in the West to some, a villain and a treasonous Russian to others. And Papadopoulos himself, do you remember who he was or who he is? This is a guy who went to jail for a while because of his involvement with the Trump campaign and then accusations that he had deceived the FBI, feeding them allegedly, and had proven in court, I guess, that he was giving them misleading information about the depth of his contacts with Russia and Russian officials. George Papadopoulos, he was at the very center and at the very beginning of the Russia collusion narrative that was spun up. And, people say, oh, Russia, 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 it's a hoax, hoax, hoax. I get it. But when I see this stuff going down, and then I see the reactions that we're getting today, I have to say, I'm kind of left scratching my head and lifting an eyebrow. Sometimes it isn't what is said, it's what isn't said that tells you the most. For often a person speaks volumes with their silence. And tonight, Donald Trump has said nothing about this. He has remained completely silent on the Navalny death, while a number of conservative or freedom-oriented or MAGA-based media influencers and journalists have come out with comments that I would say are, I don't know how to read them exactly. They're carefully crafted, I'll put it that way, to make it pro-Trump, maybe, but not entirely supportive of Navalny. It's kind of a mixed bag, I guess, but I wouldn't say it's in line with what Biden was saying at all. Yeah, Trump has said nothing about it so far. Who knows, maybe he will. But frankly, given everything that's been going on, I'm not surprised. And then today, Trump was fined $330 million, 336 or something like that, in a New York court, and he's been barred from conducting business for 3 years in New York. His two sons, also in the ruling, are now prohibited from holding executive positions in any corporation or business entity in New York for 2 years. So they can't run their family business up there. They have to have other people run their affairs for them in that jurisdiction. And this all goes back to the business lawsuits against Trump and his taxation issues, which are connected to the allegations that he was exaggerating the value of his assets in order to get more favorable loan terms and the judge ruled against Trump harshly. And I don't care how rich you are or say you are, a penalty of 336 million, I believe it was today. And again, I don't have the notes right in front of me. Forgive me if I'm getting the figure off just a little bit, but I'm pretty much close on the money. That kind of cash, that's got to hurt. That has got to hurt. How much of this is just political window dressing? Can't really say at this point. I am definitely getting the sense, though, as maybe you are as well at this point, that all of this still ties back to Russia, insofar as I think the Biden administration, the lettered agencies in the United States, I think they see Trump as being connected to Russia in some way, or that at least Russia is supporting him, in spite of Putin coming out a couple of days ago saying that he would prefer Biden to be the president instead of Donald Trump, saying that Biden is more predictable, and then kind of smiling while he said it. I don't believe that. I don't think Vladimir Putin wants Biden to be president. I think he wants Trump to be the president, because I think he knows that Donald Trump will be a more peaceful president. He will not. He'll probably end that war in Ukraine. And the irony here is that Trump stood up at his last speech and said that, accused Biden of essentially giving Ukraine to Putin, and then said that that's why Putin came out to say that he actually supports Trump. And yet I think it's probably the other way around. It's like reverse psychology for the public, and yet it's so shadowy, and there's so much going on behind the scenes that we just don't know. Then, even though this stuff is being said, we just don't know. But if you read between the lines on all of these things, stand back, get the aerial view, you can start to sort of put things together. And I'm not saying that the Russians are colluding with Donald Trump, but what I do think is I think that maybe from a distance, and maybe even without Trump having any knowledge of it, I think that they are nudging and helping matters along. And here in Canada as well, honestly, I think a bunch of countries have their fingers into our politics, including China as well, and probably in an even bigger way. And so other online influencers have sort of chimed in on this stuff. Jack Posobiec posted saying, Democrats and their media allies have cheered the lockup of their political opponents for years, comparing the Navalny imprisonment and now death to what is being done to Trump in the United States. He added, quote, now they want to act morally outraged without looking in the mirror. And then media on the opposite side accuse Posobiec of pushing pro-Kremlin propaganda. Molly Hemingway of The Federalist today posted, quote, while Democrats continue to pursue the imprisonment of their top political opponent, the death of 47-year-old Putin opponent Navalny in prison in Russia is a grim reminder of how evil the strategy is. I guess you can assess the motivations behind these statements for yourself. Tom Fitton of, what's the name of his organization? The legal group, judicial, I can't remember the name of his group. They get involved in a lot of constitutional issues. He said, more difficult for the Biden administration to criticize Putin on Navalny as Biden's DOJ and party politicians are trying to jail his opponent Trump and Republican Party leaders and activists across the country with unprecedented abusive and anti-constitutional prosecutions. Laura Loomer compared Navalny's imprisonment with the investigations and prosecutions of people involved in the January 6th riot or demonstration, whatever you want to call it. Depends, again, on your political perspective. Dinesh D'Souza, who has done some pretty incredible work as not just a journalist, but also an investigator looking into the last election. I'm sure you're all familiar with his work. He said today, quote, "I'm quite amused at all the outrage over Navalny. Putin wanted to make sure his leading opponent died in prison. Isn't that exactly what the Biden regime is trying to do here? To the cheers of the same people expressing indignation over Putin's authoritarianism?" And I think that he has an absolutely valid point. What moral authority does Joe Biden stand on as he sits there and accuses Vladimir Putin of anything when he has a bunch of people in jail because of the J6 incident? That's the problem with the current regimes in Canada and the United States, both the ruling Trudeau Liberals supported by the NDP, and in the States, the Biden administration. People have lost confidence and trust, and when they speak, people roll their eyes and simply don't believe or accept their information or their opinions. So it goes on. But Trump, yeah, interestingly, silent on this issue tonight. Now, what do I think? Do you care? Does it matter? I think it's pretty evident what has happened here. I think I think that the proper perspective on this is that you have people in charge of countries who get to play by a whole different set of rules. If you or I kill someone, we go to jail. If you're the ruler of a large country, if you're the ruler or the president of a superpower, you get to wake up in the morning and decide who lives and who dies. Will you drop the bombs here, drop the bombs there, or maybe decide to not drop any bombs today? That's why presidents honestly do have immunity, and why the law does not apply to everyone, at least not in the same way. Presidents, rulers of countries, get to play by a whole different set of rules. And it is interesting, isn't it, to see how many of Vladimir Putin's opponents aren't around anymore? So are those accusations leveled at Putin fair? I don't know how far I want to go with my statements. I will say this. Here in Canada, you could say that we've had some political prisoners in jail, but they're not dead. At least there's that. It isn't quite the same here as it is over there. And isn't it interesting as well, what questions Tucker Carlson didn't ask when he was in Moscow. I took note. What subjects did Tucker Carlson not breach? He didn't ask about Navalny. There were other subjects too that would have touched a nerve. He chose to stay away from them. And I don't know what rules, maybe, what ground rules he was facing as he went into that interview. None of us will ever know for sure. I don't expect, if there were any. And I think there probably were. It was pretty clear to me that Vladimir Putin knew what was coming because he had those documents in hand and ready to hand over to Tucker Carlson, those historical documents, the copies, laying out an international legal argument for Putin's justification for saying that Ukraine is part of Russia. Yeah. Geographically and otherwise. Historically. Anyway, I digress. Assassinations. Who do you believe? And it depends on your perspective. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back on the other side. We have a lot of other news to cover before we get into really what will be our top story of the night, I think, which is the interview that we have coming up with Kayla Pollock, who's going to talk to us about her experience with the vaccine injury compensation plan in Canada, and her personal story will, I don't know, it'll rattle you. It might, it's definitely gonna evoke emotion. I'll be right back.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow, maybe too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
So before we get into this story with Kayla Pollock, I'm going to take you to Ottawa. Can you believe it's been 2 years since the Freedom Convoy rolled into the nation's capital with thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people taking to the streets there to protest the pandemic, lockdowns, mask mandates, vaccination mandates. 2 years. In some ways it seems like yesterday, and other ways it seems like it was so long ago. And I think maybe it's a little too easy to forget what was done to us by Justin Trudeau, the ruling class, the elites, the Liberals, the NDP, and the Conservatives. All of them. The Bloc, the Green Party, all of them. Fear gripped them just as it gripped us, at least the members of Parliament. That's what brought the truckers out, the mandates, the authoritarianism. And then we saw the use of the Emergencies Act, the War Measures Act, renamed, as the Prime Minister basically declared war on his own people who were out in front of the Parliament buildings protesting and asking for his attention so they could have a conversation that never came. But the police did, as we all know, at the direction of the government, as Justin Trudeau unconstitutionally, now so ruled by a court of law, used that Emergencies Act, put it into motion, and on that day when the EA Act was invoked, I said that Canada died at that moment. And indeed, I have not been able to, I haven't been able to recognize the country that I'd known ever since. It's essentially been transformed. And so I sit in this chair and you watch in our digital community, and together, nightly, we seek a path back to what once was. Something hopefully maybe better, a path back to freedom. Well, today in Parliament, two freedom fighters, two members of the Convoy, held a news conference. And some of the mainstream media actually did show up, which surprised me. We're going to take you to Ottawa now and pick up what they have to say at the Parliament buildings. You'll recognize these guys, I think, especially Chris Dacey, who has become a very prominent media figure, a regular there on Wellington Street in the nation's capital, chasing those politicians down and asking the tough questions day in, day out, and working beyond that, of course. Let's pick up this news conference. Here we go, up to Ottawa.
Fortunately, they can get in time. But just also, too, I don't know, sir, if the press is related.
Anniversary.
We're obviously with the Freedom Movement. And,
Convoy in Ottawa.
One thing in
this
particular, if I was to have, say, maybe a red maple leaf on and freedom across that, I would not be able to enter the building. So that's just a note. And it does cause quite a bit of delays for freedom fighters, for example, if they wanted to just simply come in and watch Parliament. But really why I'm here is we're all well aware of the ruling by Justice Mosley in relation to the Emergency Act, which was called upon by the Trudeau government. Now, it was quite stated that it was unjustified and unconstitutional. Now, being amongst the freedom movement, obviously people ask and they say that was a great victory. You guys must be happy for this. But I must say, no, it's a hollow victory for us. And it's a hollow victory for us because of what had occurred. People's lives have been disrupted, maybe changed forever. Charges, loss of income, loss of jobs, all for their right to fight for the freedoms that we have in this country. However, it did note one important thing, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to be here to address this. It exposed, this ruling, exposed the lies, falsehood, and myths, truths that accompanied 2 years ago while we were here in Ottawa protesting. Everything from breaking into stores to arson. It was all proven that it never happened. They were all falsehoods. Many MPs stated these were concerns, stated that somehow people practicing their rights under our charter and under our freedom of rights was some sort of a threat to this country. And many MPs on the Liberal side perpetuated these lies. We have still not had an apology for those lies from any MP in the government. I do not want to speak for groups within the freedom movement that have started litigation processes, but there are litigation processes underway right now. So I won't speak any further to that, but there has. Ideally, an apology from the government would help in the matter. But what happened was, and what is extremely disturbing on a historical presence, I believe Canada itself changed very dramatically on that last day, 2 years ago on the 17th. Because what had occurred is we had our ruling government weaponize police officers, weaponize the establishment, and weaponize the justice system against its own people. Now, these were people that our Prime Minister labeled many words, called them a threat, said we couldn't go on trains, said we couldn't fly, all because we challenged and we wanted basically our own health. We weren't willing to take something that was really experimental. And the evidence that has come up, although it's being pushed down, will eventually prove to that point that we were correct. But really, I really want to stick to the message that our police were weaponized, our justice system were weaponized against our people. And historically, that has not done very well for companies when a leader against a group he disagrees with in a country uses violence to suppress them. Is a very slippery slope. Now, I do also want to salute to all those that were involved in the original convoy for their bravery and their foresight. That foresight, they realized what is happening. They realize that we have a government in place that is really ideologically driven. They do have I will use this word tyranny because I believe someone in the media said that our main goal right now is to fight tyranny. But if tyranny is, and quite simple, there's several bills that are going to restrict freedom of speech in this country. We have people in Parliament wanting just simply a law in place that anyone that supports our oil industry to be in jail for 2 years. That this is the type of ideological thinking that's causing extreme divisions in this country. I can't remember in our history, and other besides the senior, where the government has basically waged war on one of the provinces in this country without negotiation. And it has been shown that there is negotiation. Leaders should be pragmatic. We don't have anything from this government stating that they're going to be have any sort of pragmatism towards any opposing views in this country, regardless whether it infringes upon our rights as well. So, again, across this country, there will be many events. These are not celebrations, but more for remembrance of what occurred on the 17th. There's several events in the city, in the province, and across the country, one of which is in Ottawa. So I'm going to have my colleague Daisy just kind of describe what's happening tomorrow, give his thoughts on the original convoy as well, and then I will move into some other matters afterwards.
Yeah. Hey, Chris Daisy. So I was at the original convoy the entire time. I'm a resident of Ottawa. I've lived in Ottawa my whole life. And I've been here, I guess, pretty much around the hill, or part of the group that's been come to known as the Wellington Street Regulars. I've been here for the whole time since. So anywho, this weekend we're planning I guess a commemoration is probably the best way to put it. We didn't choose the weekend and the date by accident. This is the time that the Emergency Act was invoked, And, you know, I was there and a lot of us were present for the brutal clear out here in Ottawa. So we're going to remember that. We're going to get together and network, and we've got some fun stuff planned as well. So we're going to have speakers. We're going to have a march around town. That's all been coordinated with the Ottawa Police, so everything should go off without a hitch, I'm hoping. And we're going to have music speakers and just try to have an all-around good time. So it's important that we remember what happened with the Emergencies Act, but we also want to remember the hope and the love and all the good things that came with the convoy as well. So that's what we have planned for the weekend. Good? Yep.
So just one other section that I did want to promise is what's going to be the future of the freedom movement as it is. And there's some new voices. But first, I just kind of wanted to stress again that original convoy, the freedom movement, and it's been so much misconstrued throughout the media and just throughout the general public. We are a very peaceful movement. We believe in no violence at all. We are a mix of all Canadians, Canadians that were born here, Canadians that have fled other countries. Just in my small little group alone, we speak 6 languages. I have people that were born in different countries that have come here to Canada, that have seen and what's happening in terms of the loss of and the threats of our freedoms. Going back to how I want to preference this by, it is again to congratulate those that started the original convoy, to illustrate this to the general public. But where we are right now, and this, I'm truly reaching out to the general public, regardless of who you are, where you're from, that the freedom movement is actually for yourselves. We are in a very difficult time in this country. I don't believe Canada has ever been in worse economic conditions that we have right now. We have a laundry list of corruption, alleged theft, alleged billions missing. The list goes on and on. Inquiries canceled, non-cooperation in inquiries. The list goes on and on. So as a people, there's no accountability. Good governance and ethics has certainly left this government as it stands right now. There's none of it. Good governance and ethics are a part of their description, and none of it I see at all. Basically, secrets. There's some secrets in the government are repugnant. There should not be any. We have no accountability, and this is why I'm reaching out to our people of this country. There's many things still ahead. As I mentioned, censorship bills, the signing with the World Health Organization of the pandemic treaty, which gives our health sovereignty away. There's been no discussion on this. It has to be researched. This is forthcoming pending. Our Prime Minister also wanted to add climate change into health. Where's the rationale? Where's the science? Where is anything to relate that? We, obviously, in terms of initiatives, there's many of us within the freedom movement. Some of them, which will be here today to present them. I will forward them off to you, their initiatives. But most of the initiatives are, even from a municipal level, people getting engaged. How are we going to operate? How are we going to have responsible government? The government right now has basically lost the reasoning that they actually work for us. This building that we're in is ours. The parliament that they're in is ours. They're supposed to listen to us. They do not listen to us. They're staying focused on their own ideology and putting that through. Because of that, going into a new election, of course there's going to be a swing as it looks, but this is an excellent opportunity for us to reach out to the general public, for all our citizens, to realize and to make sure that this corruption, this unaccountability in government doesn't exist. So how do we go about that? Well, there's several options. There's several things within the movement in which we need our citizens to come work with us on. Basically, Ideally, the Senate that we have, we need an independent Senate, an electable Senate. We have to have revisions of the Privy Council. We may also have to have revisions of the Crown. Do we still want to have a Crown system? Do we still want to have a parliamentary-based democracy, which we have right now? If this is what results in a government so corrupt and so dysfunctional as we have now. So like I said, I will forward those initiatives that we have in the group. There's many groups, and I'm passionately reaching out to the general community. We are not thugs, we are not terrorists, we are not racists, as we're coined in many places. We are you. We come from several walks of life. We have everything from welders to truck drivers to cooks to actually members of police enforcement, to members of the judiciary, to politicians as well. So we are not a radical fringe or anything like that. We are free citizens. We are free citizens that have seen the change in our government over the last year, realize where it's heading, and that our freedoms are threatened. And that's it. So I will, again, I'd mentioned there are several initiatives from some of the panelists that we're going to be here today. I will make sure that I reveal them going forward. And any questions from the media as it stands now?
More about what's planned this weekend, like specifically when?
Yeah. So tomorrow, Saturday the 17th, starting at 11 a.m., there's a permit issued on Parliament Hill. So most of our activities will be on Parliament Hill. That begins at 11. There's some music. We're hoping to have speeches around probably noon. And then the planned march is at 2 p.m. So we've been working with Ottawa Police to figure out a route for that. There are some other things going on in the city. It's the final weekend of Winterlude this weekend, and there's also some other planned protests. So the parade or the march route isn't exactly finalized yet, but we're working with Ottawa Police to make sure that that's going to go off okay. And then we're back to the Hill after the march till about 5 o'clock probably.
What can you tell us? What can you tell us about speakers, Stacey?
I don't want to put out a list of speakers just yet. We're still waiting on a few confirmations, but there should be quite a few. And some of the people will be the people that are doing different initiatives. So there's people that are working in their local communities and doing different things to attack this problem that we're all facing. And many of those people will be speaking. And then there'll probably be time for an open mic too, and to meet some people afterwards if people are so inclined.
Are you expecting to have a lot of people? And if you speak French, if you can answer in French.
I do speak a little French. Yeah, English is a little easier for me. It's hard to put a number on these things. I wouldn't say it's going to be in the many thousands, but if there's a few hundred, that wouldn't surprise me.
What people you're expecting from out of town, and can you address the notion of whether or not this is a vehicle-based protest?
Yeah, okay, so there was some messaging that came out earlier today, I believe, CPC maybe. No, there's not expected to be any kind of vehicle protest of any sort. There are a group of people coming from Southern Ontario that will be traveling together, and they've collected some donations for a local church. So they'll be coming into town together, dropping off those donations to Capital City Bikers Church. They run a free store out of there that does a lot of work in the Vanier community. It's a community that really struggles and needs a lot of support. So the people that are coming in with vehicles are going to bring those donations to the church, and then everyone will just make their way downtown on their own, but not expecting any kind of vehicle or stuff like that, a vehicle-related protest of any sort.
We'll now take questions from Zoom. If you have a question, please use raise hand function. Monsieur Lily, you have the floor. One question, one follow-up.
Hi, this is Shallow Lee from City News. This is for the first speaker, the gentleman in the headband. I apologize if I missed this, but can you get your name and how it's spelled?
Yes, it's D-E-R-E-K.
Oh, sorry, your full name.
Yeah, D-E-R-E-K, N-O-O-N-A-N.
Thank you very much for that. And as a follow-up, relating to Saturday's protest,
yes,
have you gotten any clearance from police or any coordination with police in relation to the use of loudspeakers or horns? Because I know that was an issue 2 years ago, and it has been an issue with more recent Palestinian protests in Ottawa.
Well, I can speak to you can speak to that. You have
Yeah, so as far as with the City of Ottawa, there is a general rule that no amplification devices are allowed. We've been kind of sticking to that rule as much as possible. Our event is going to be on Parliament Hill, where we do have a permit. So we have a permit to use amplification equipment, sound equipment, that sort of thing on Parliament Hill. As far as off Parliament Hill, I think the general rules should apply. No megaphones, no amplification devices, but you'd have to check with bylaw and Ottawa Police to be certain on that.
Sorry, what's your message to Ottawa residents who don't like the convoy?
I mean, I would recommend that they come out and try to talk to some of the people that are going to be around. We don't bite. We're happy to talk. And like Derek said, we're trying to reach out and talk to as many Canadians as possible. So if people have concerns, come talk to someone. I think that's the best way to start.
You want to reach the general public. How do you plan on doing that?
Well,
starting with this, I guess.
Definitely, there are several things we like to reach out to the general public is their understanding of the issues that are at hand within the government in terms of the alleged corruption, the alleged theft. Are they happy with the way government is behaving? There's no accountability, no disclosure of actually what's occurring on several matters. And the biggest thing is 65% of this country has less than $500 left over at the end of the month. Now, the government that's in play right now has basically come out and said that they're for the middle class. So if they're for the middle class, I ask the general public, having less than $500 left over at the end of the month, is that a government for you? Is it a government for you that has more increased taxes on April 1st? Is this a government for you in which they're proceeding with censorship bills that are down lead? Is this a government for you that priorities are constantly shifting? Do I see any priorities for housing veterans? Do I see any priorities for fixing the housing on First Nations? We're still waiting after 8 years for clean water on First Nations lands. So these are types of things that we talk about. The poverty, how are our children being educated in school? These are several issues that we want to reach out to the community on. And I know there's concerns. The poverty is increasing, homelessness is increasing. You're seeing in like the small town of Brockville, on one day, 12 people died from overdoses within 2 hours from fentanyl. Is that the country? I'm asking the citizens, is this the country you want to live in? Is it? Where you can't trust the government, where we're seeing theft, we can't get answers to past corruption. There's taxes and taxes in our future. Is this what we want to live in? Do we want to live in this division as well? Do we want to live in a country where one province is somehow wrong? The one province that has fed this whole nation for quite some time, we can't negotiate? Do we want to live in a country where arbitrarily a minister comes out and says, I'm not making roads anymore? When we need roads to First Nations in the north, at least, when we have crumbling infrastructure in our cities now, all in the name of ideology, all unproven. So these are the things I'm reaching out to the general public. I know they're feeling the same thing. And it will take collectively all of us to change it. It will take collectively all of us to make the government aware that they're accountable to us. They don't rule us. They're accountable to us. So these are the types of things that I'd love to speak to any citizen on.
Expecting to receive any support from MPs?
I can answer that. Yes, so there has been several MPs that have spoken out harshly on the use of the Emergency Act. That really, according to Justice Mosley, there really wasn't any basis for it at all. So I do appreciate those MPs speaking out on that. I'm hoping that they will be in attendance tomorrow as well. I did give some overtures. We'll see if they come. Primarily the Conservative Party's been the only party that has come out against the use of the Emergency Act. Me personally, I won't mention their names, but I have had some very good conversations with members of the NDP and the Liberals that do see what I just said, but they can't control the directions of their parties as well. So hopefully they'll be there too.
We'll go to Zoom again. Annie Bergeron, one question, one follow-up. Annie, are you there?
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, there we go. You talked about wanting an apology. I'm wondering who specifically is kind of the most important. Is it the Prime Minister? Is it other members of Cabinet? And following up on that last question, have you had any conversations while you were on Parliament Hill? Why did you choose Parliament Hill today for this press conference?
Okay, I'll kind of answer that backwards. Why I chose this day for the press conference in Parliament Hill is because we will be remembering what occurred on the 17th, just on Parliament Hill tomorrow. So that was appropriate. I have spoken to some MPs in regards to this. In terms of an apology, ideally I would like an apology from the all parties that had voted in favor of the Emergency Act. That includes Mr. Singh and the NDP. That also includes Justin Trudeau. Krista Freeland definitely owes a significant apology, especially to those that have suffered freezing of their bank accounts and the repercussions after that. I actually would hope that she would apologize to each person individually for doing that. Now, there's Justice Lametti. There's also Minister Mandicino. An apology for obviously voting in favor of the Emergency Act. I'm hoping these comments were in jest or comical on their part, but of bringing in tanks to remove people with tanks, our own military, resembling what a third world nation would do. So yes, those are the apologies that I would like to hear.
And just following up, at the very beginning, you talked about how if you were wearing a Canadian flag or something about oil and gas, it would be hard to get into Parliament today. I'm wondering why you chose a press conference inside Parliament instead of something outside where the protest had been. Was there an MP who had sponsored or invited you to bring the conference here? Is that part of the reason?
No, it was an initiative up on myself. And you sort of answered the question within the question, is the reason why I'm here in Parliament is this is where the decisions of the country are made. We had a decision that was lawfully and unconstitutionally made upon us, and I'm coming here to address it. Throughout the last 2 years, I've been at many rallies, many of my colleagues have. We've tried to have conversations with the establishment or the legacy press. They have been ignored largely for just the issues that I've brought up today. So that is why I'm here. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, and that wraps up the news conference. Let's take a break. Now, before we go to break, just alerting you all that we will be jumping off YouTube and Facebook very shortly because we're going to start dealing with subject matter that is just not YouTube, Facebook compatible. If you get my drift, we'll be right back on the other side of this.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now, at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News. The antivirus program. For your mind.
So Andrew McGillivray from Veterans for Freedom will be joining us in probably about 5 to 10 minutes. And that will begin our coverage of this story involving Kayla Pollock, who will tell us her personal story with the thing in the arm. That's when we will have to jump off Facebook and YouTube. So if you haven't moved over to Rumble or Twitter yet, I suggest that you do that. I did put the link to the Rumble channel, tonight's broadcast, in the comments section in the chat. So look for that in there, and hopefully you can navigate your way over to the Rumble channel. You can also support us, as you just saw, by donating at maverickdonations.com. That's the Give, Send, Go account that we have set up. Great organization there. Christian-based, super friendly, very helpful people. And we also have a donation page set up at freedomreporters.com. And, of course, we do still have these Maverick News shirts with the embroidered logos on them. If you donate $60 or more, I'll send you one of those shirts or a hoodie in black. That's because it's the company colors. And we're going to be getting some other t-shirts and things. And I also still have some Exile the Knights of Malta shirts in stock as well. No embroidered ones, obviously, but the hoodies and other shirts. Just let me know what size you need. Leave a comment on the donation page if you donate to us tonight and help us keep the operation running here and covering the bills. Phone system, I've been trying to cut the costs there, and I have found a way to keep the costs a little bit lower, but it's a very expensive proposition. So you can support us that way. Make sure you like, share, subscribe over on Rumble. And we are going to move over to Rumble in just a moment because I see our guest is arriving in the back room. So let me run a little transition here while I reconfigure our feed so that we don't get banned. That would really suck. I'm tired of being banned. I'll be right back. Stay with me.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Donate at freedom